Good morning. The grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Let us worship God together. The artist Adi Nez is one of Israel's most praised and respected photographers. His exhibitions have traveled throughout Israel, America, and Europe. One magazine introduced him as the face of modern Israeli photography. In his exhibition Biblical Stories, Adi Nez uses themes from biblical narratives to explore present-day issues of social justice. His large-scale photographs often reference well-known works from the history of art and work with contemporary representations of subjects from the Old Testament. His project emerged in response to a personal crisis. He was unemployed and had to deal with the end of an 8-year-long relationship. Each photograph, in its own way, attempts to reveal his sense of being lost in Israeli society. As a gay man of Middle Eastern descent, living in a country that is going through economic recession, he's wrestling with questions of identity and belonging. In his eyes, Israel as a country has undergone a major transformation. What used to be an utopian vision of being the chosen people has now been replaced by a capitalistic ideology whose conquering spirit has created a deeply unequal society. His idea was to draw on well-known Jewish biblical figures and to be inspired by the dramatic and metaphorical potential of their stories, highlighting their experiences of dispossession, loss, and exile. Casting ordinary people as the biblical figures, he confronts us with Israel's new urban underclass. The biblical characters are captured at the lowest point in their lives and are cast as homeless people. Here is Abraham and Isaac on their way to Mount Moriah. We are confronted with the kind of sacrifices we are willing to make. Adonais thinks of all the fathers who are willing to send their sons to the army. The prophet Elijah. He lies on a park bench with his head resting on his hand. He's aged and weary, but the ravens seem to care. Here's Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob, and known for his coat of many colors. He meets us as a young boy walking through the streets. His eyes are wide open, as if he could sense that his brothers are scheming to sell him into slavery. In his exhibition, Nez, for the first time, includes women in his photographs. This photograph, titled Ruth and Naomi Gleaners, is modeled after Jean-François Millet's oil painting, The Gleaners from 1857. This scene takes us straight into this morning's sermon on Naomi and Ruth. But I will stay with Nez's interpretation of the scene, which is much more realistic and evocative. We see them sitting on the unpaved floor of a fruit and vegetable market. They have been gleaning food from the leftovers of a market day. Empty boxes are scattered across the floor. The street is littered with refuse. Everything is staged. Nez wants to show us what he calls the end of the world. The vegetables displayed are onions and garlic because they are, in his own words, dry, basic, and make people cry. But his main focus is on portraying the deep and complex connection between Ruth and Naomi, captured in Ruth's well-known words to Naomi. Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely. Only death will separate you and me. It is a classic verse chosen for wedding ceremonies and a central verse in the book of Ruth. But as we will see, in its original context, these are not romantic words exchanged between a bride and a groom. This declaration of love is made by a daughter-in-law to her mother-in-law at a crucial turning point in their lives. Adine's photograph helps us to enter more deeply into the biblical story and discover its lasting relevance. Or to speak with Nez, one should go far away to find oneself. Indeed, reading the story of Naomi and Ruth is to go far away, far back in time in order to find oneself, to see oneself more clearly and to act more boldly. This is what Nez did, and his photograph invites us to do the same. So let's cross over. Let's cross over there together. In what better way to do that than with Johnny Clegg's The Crossing?
That eat away at every breath that I take, through all the nights I've lain alone in someone else's dream awake, all the words in truth we have spoken that the wind has blown away. Oh, it's only you that remains with me, clear as the light of day. Oh, Cieza, Cizo figa we baba no ma. Oh, Cieza, Cia good lelom klaba, Cia wela la pesheya, lule zonta bezemyama, la pazobe kapanzi, konke kulupeka.
The story of Naomi and Ruth has often been sentimentalized and trivialized, imagining idyllic settings and model characters far removed from the harsh realities of the actual story. Adine's is much closer to the truth. Naomi has come a long way. She looks tired and emaciated, her eyes closed in thought, but her posture signals readiness, the ability to respond and get up quickly. She will not give up easily. Her story is placed in the time of Judges, a dark period in Israel's history, a time of cultural, political, and social anarchy. Her hometown Bethlehem, which is called the House of Bread, is experiencing a devastating drought. Despair and famine drive Naomi and her husband Elimelech to leave their home and country, to find refuge and shelter in Moab. Naomi is up on her feet and takes initiative. She will not just sit and wait for better times. The decision to find refuge in Moab was, to say the least, controversial. The Moabites were considered Israel's arch enemies. Moabites were banned from entering Israel's community, while the Israelites considered themselves to be descendants of divine promise. The Moabites were shunned as descendants of deception and incest. And according to Deuteronomy, Moab did not offer them bread or water for the journey when Israel fled from Egypt. But this time, Moab welcomes the two refugees from Israel. Tragically, soon after their arrival, Naomi's husband Elimelech dies, and she's left alone with her two sons. What is she going to do? She regains new life and hope when her two sons marry two Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. But only 10 years later, both her sons die, leaving her alone with her two daughter-in-laws. Naomi becomes a Job-like figure. She's exiled from home, living in a foreign country, poor, widowed, and robbed of her sons. But in contrast to Job, she does not insist on her innocence, but feels punished by God. Her crossing into Moab must have felt like a serious transgression. Has she been too tolerant to allow her sons getting married to Moabite women? She knows exactly what her relatives in Bethlehem will say to her. She will have to blame herself for all the misfortune. Later on in the story, she will confess, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." But unlike Job, she will not curse the day of her birth, not sit and wait for better times. She will be back on her feet and take initiative. She might feel that God has turned against her, but she will do everything in her power to bring about change. When she hears that Bethlehem has been blessed with plenty of food, she decides to return home. God might have deserted her. She might have been left empty, but she will continue to seek God's fullness. The anguish and lament does not stop her from entrusting her daughters-in-law to God's mercy. She insists on them going back to their mother's home. She is old, but they are young. Life has still so much to offer to them. She does not want her misfortune to continue to affect their lives. She kisses them goodbye with a blessing. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. But Ruth will not let go. She clings on to Naomi. She is determined to follow her. She proves to be a real friend in need. Unlike Job's friends, she does not blame Naomi, lecture her, or reprimand her. Instead, she affirms her mother-in-law with a moving declaration of love and loyalty. Nothing but death will be able to separate them. I'm reading the verse again. Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely. Only death will separate you and me. What an affirmation of Naomi. God might have turned against her, but she will not. Whatever misfortune is still in store, she will bear it together with Naomi. And whatever people will say, she will stand up against their prejudice toward her. She might be foreign, poor and widowed, but she will change people's hearts. Your people will be my people. She might be a Moabite woman held responsible for seducing Israelites to idolatry, but she will change people's perceptions. Your God will be my God. It is a declaration of love that deeply believes that love is able to transcend barriers of culture, of class, of age, and of religion. Love is not only stronger than death, but also stronger than past divisions and hatred. It is extraordinary what kind of confidence can be born of love. Naomi deeply cares for her mother-in-law and will not allow her to face the uncertain future by herself. And Naomi, she had to give in. Adinez beautifully captures Ruth's spirit. She looks past us into the distance with clear and focused eyes. She will not give up. Naomi is turned toward her with silent admiration, struggling to say anything, holding back to touch her. The feminist liberation theologian Dorothee Sölle reveals the beauty of this moment when she confesses, "We begin the path to happiness not as seekers, but as those who have already been found." God might have deserted Naomi, but Ruth will not. Naomi might have thought that she still needs to find happiness. Meanwhile, happiness has already found her, before the journey has even started. God might be hidden throughout the narrative, but what if God has come to Naomi in the guise of a Moabite woman? It is another moment of crossing.
Through all the days that eat away at every breath that I take, through all the nights I've lain alone in someone else's dream awake, all the words in truth we have spoken that the wind has blown away, oh, it's only you that remains with me, clear as the light of day. O Cieza, Cizo figa we baba no ma. O Cieza, Sia good lelom plaba, Sia wela la pesheya, lule zonta bezemyama.
Adinez's picture is an outcry against a world which offers to widows only humiliating methods to secure their right to exist. Their life is a relentless struggle for survival. When they arrive in Bethlehem, they appeal to Israel's justice tradition. The poor have a right to glean from the fields of the rich, and widows have a right to be redeemed and supported by their relatives. Naomi and Ruth clearly desire more than mercy. They demand justice. According to Ina Peterman, the partnership between these two women can be seen to undermine the dominance of male-centered thinking. The vital interests of women are clearly heard in a climate of patriarchal self-interest. The perspective of women is set in opposition to the men's perspective, providing some gender political balancing. Male prejudice toward the foreign woman is at least articulated and questioned. But Ruth becomes quickly trapped between self-sufficiency and patronage as she begins to reap from the corners of the fields and to glean the remainder of the harvest. Now Boaz, the landowner, notices her and gets to hear her story. He's moved by her loyalty to Naomi and begins to look out for her. He makes sure that she's safe, working among young men on the field. We're once again reminded how precarious Ruth's situation is. Her life is at constant risk. It is shocking that Boaz has to instruct and warn his male workers not to molest her. Boaz treats her with much respect and grants her a few privileges, which in turn raise Naomi's hopes especially when she finds out that Boaz is related to her family and according to the law could act as a redeemer, a kind of family guardian for Ruth. This practice of levirate marriage was meant to ensure that a childless widow is taken care of. But it is once again a reminder of how vulnerable and powerless women, especially widows, were in a patriarchal society, and still are. When Boaz has to later negotiate the deal with another potential redeemer, Ruth is reduced to an object of trade with no rights of her own. The book of Ruth can therefore hardly be read as pursuing a feminist agenda, even though the limits of patriarchy are tested in several instances. They are never really challenged and overcome. In the end, the book's basic vision of social solidarity, so beautifully displayed by Ruth, keeps being undermined by patriarchy in its ideal of the family. I'm coming back to Naomi's gaze in Nez's picture. Initially, I interpreted it as an expression of determination and vision. But now, having looked closer at her immediate circumstances and her limited choices, I see fear and despair. It is as if she is asking herself at this moment, is marriage really the only way for them to find social security and reintegration? The same applies to Naomi. At first, I interpreted her turning toward Ruth as an expression of admiration. But now, one could also see it as a sad surrender to a system that keeps rendering women powerless and fully dependent on so-called male guardians. What is she thinking? Has she been too forceful by sending Ruth to the threshing floor to advance Boaz and propose marriage? Has she been too selfish to scheme for the sake of economic security? Is Ruth's potential marriage with Boaz her only way to restore her dignity? Later on, when Ruth gives birth to Obed, Naomi's friends praise her, saying, Naomi has a son. Naomi has a son. Does Naomi, the bitter one, take advantage of Ruth, the friendly one? Has patriarchy managed to drive a wedge even between Naomi and Ruth? Up to this point in the narrative, we might have thought that the opposite of poverty is not wealth but community. Ruth's solidarity and loyalty is a witness to a spirit of Ubuntu, but even the support that Naomi and Ruth are able to offer to each other is not able to escape the power of a system that keeps generating female economic dependence. If this is the case, then even the benevolence of an elderly male relative, the willingness of Boaz to marry Ruth cannot really be called redemption, as it is just reinforces a system of dependency, a dependency that left Ruth and Naomi destitute in the first place. No matter how bold and unconventional their decisions, they have to operate within a society that is firmly ruled by patriarchy. Yes, women are lifted up as leading characters, but the story's ultimate endorsement of women seems to be that they serve the interest of men. In the end, even Ruth's faithfulness to Naomi stands yet again in the service of patriarchy. Naomi and Ruth have to constantly negotiate between life and death, autonomy and dependency, resistance and submission, vision and tradition. But how far can unselfish solidarity go in an unjust system? Indeed, one will have to agree with those who say that the feminist relevance of the book remains strangely in suspense. Interestingly, the way the book of Ruth is positioned in the Greek and Christian Bible, one could consider the story a strong counterpoint to the descriptions of the murder and kidnapping of women in the preceding chapters of the book of Judges. And the story in some ways also anticipates Hannah's song about the reversal of power in the opening chapters of the book of Samuel that follows, nourishing the hope of a messianic era of peace and justice under the kingship of David. And yet, even such positioning and framing of the story cannot blind us to the harsh realities of patriarchy that keep controlling the plot. Are we to rejoice in the birth of this son? Is this what we should consider a happy end? And does the fact that Obed becomes David's grandfather redeem the story? Redemption in the book of Ruth is deeply compromised. We have to look for it in the unfolding of complicated relationships, burdened with mixed motives and driven by the desire for survival. Yes, Ruth will in the end find a place in Jesus' genealogy. And Jesus' birth will mark the birth of a new vision of equality. But even after almost 2,000 years, we still fall far short of such a vision. Adesnes wanted us to go far away into a distant land in order to return with a clearer vision of justice. The photograph is the result of his own return, his own attempt to resist trivializing the story. And it has left a strong imprint on me. Here is a new generation of young artists trying to reclaim and reread their religious heritage. Their return leaves us deeply unsettled and shaken. But is this not what the season of Lent calls us to do? To take a long and honest look at ourselves and the kind of society we live in, we are still living in. But what if God comes to us as a Moabite widow, seeking shelter and acceptance? Will we be able to offer her choices that affirm her autonomy and dignity? How many more crossings are needed until we recognize her?
The days that eat away at every breath that I take, through all the nights I've lain alone in someone else's dream awake. All the words in truth we have spoken, that the wind has blown away. Oh, it's only you that remains with me, clear as the light of day. Oh, Cieza, si figa we baba no ma. Oh, Cieza, si a good lelom klaba, si a wela la peshea, lules on tabezemyama, la pazobe kapanzi, konke kulupeka.
As you leave from here, deep peace of the rolling waves to you, and deep peace of the flowing air to you, and deep peace of the shining stars to you, and deep peace of the quiet earth to you, and deep peace of the Son of peace to you. Amen.